I used to think Christmas Eve only had two sounds: wind chimes and ocean waves. But that year, there was the sound of a pine branch hitting my skin, and my father's silence, heavy as stone. If you have ever been excluded from the perfect family because your job was not polished, maybe the empty seat at the table I built is for you. They thought I would stay silent, but steel does not know silence. Steel just waits for enough heat to change its shape. My name is Rowan Hale. I am 31 years old. I am a structural welder, and I own Forge and Tide Metalworks. My work is joining steel, creating bones that hold up bridges and buildings. It is a language of fire and precision. The sparks that shower the concrete floor of my shop are the only fireworks I know, and they are more honest than any I have seen in the sky. The shop is loud. The high-frequency scream of the plasma cutter slices through a half-inch plate, while the deep thrum of the ventilation system pulls the metallic-smelling smoke away. I am closed off from it all, under my hood, focused on a single point of blue-white light. I am running a root pass on a column joint, the molten puddle obedient under my hand. The arc is steady. The joint will hold. My phone, set on the steel fabrication table 10 feet away, begins to vibrate. The vibration is insistent, a frantic buzz against the metal that cuts through the noise. I complete the pass, feathering the torch off. The intense light vanishes, plunging the world into the dim gray of the shop. I kill the arc, and the hiss of argon gas stops. I flip up my hood. The cold, damp air of Stormbreak Cove immediately bites at my face, tasting of salt and rust. I walk over, pulling off my heavy leather gloves. The phone screen is bright. A text message from Lydia, my stepmother. Rowan, just letting you know Christmas Eve this year will be just the small, immediate family. We'll catch up some other time. Don't worry about making the drive down. Just the small, immediate family. The words are polite, clinical, a surgeon's cut, neat and deep. I am not immediate. I am the appendage, the out-of-focus figure at the edge of the frame. I check the group chat. My father, Graham, has not sent a word. But just below Lydia's message, his profile picture is pinned next to the small, damning icon. Seen. He saw it. He read it. His silence is his signature. A coldness that has nothing to do with the December wind starts in my chest and spreads, threatening to make my hands shake. I will not let it. Shaking hands cannot run a clean bead. I turn away from the phone. I do not reply. I put my gloves back on. I swap my specialized Tiggy welding hood for my standard white hard hat. The numbness is there, but I can wall it off. I have a job to do. I clip my harness to the static line and walk out onto the exposed iron. My shop sits at the edge of the water, right at the foot of the project that has consumed my last 8 months. The harbor span. It is a new pedestrian bridge, an arched steel spine that my company designed, fabricated, and is now erecting. It will connect the old fishing village, which gets cut off by the high tide, to the main town. I check the joint I just finished. It is one of the main load-bearing connections for the central arch. I pull the portable ultrasonic testing unit from my tool belt, squeezing a line of gel onto the smooth, newly cooled weld. I run the transducer across the bead. The screen flashes, the digital line steady, showing a perfect, solid bond. No cracks, no inclusions, no hidden voids. I take the required non-destructive testing photographs for the file, documenting the flawless integrity of the weld. My hands are rock steady as I frame the shot. This is my proof. This is what I do. I climb down from the superstructure, the wind trying to pull me from the ladder. Back in the warmth of the site office, a small trailer humming with the sound of a space heater. I upload the images to the project database. The system prompts me for a file name for the NDT report. My fingers type without hesitation. Seat 01. It is a private code, a designation that means nothing to the county inspector, but everything to me. It is the first entry in a different kind of ledger. Back at my house, in the heavy-walled section of my shop that I built for myself, a table is waiting. It is made of 2-inch thick reclaimed sassafras, its edges wild and uneven, It is very, very long. Seat 01 is the first one I'm accounting for. My house is called Hearthline House. It is not in the manicured suburbs where I grew up. It is here, in Stormbreak Cove, anchored with steel piles directly into the cliff face overlooking the bay. I designed it. I drew the prints. I framed the entire skeleton from heavy-gauge structural steel myself, the same kind I am using for the bridge. It is a house of timber and steel, built to withstand a Category 3 hurricane and the corrosive bite of the salt air. It is my fortress. Have you ever been made to feel small because of what you do? Been shamed because you work with your hands? Because you come home with grease on your jeans or welding slag on your boots? Tell me what city you are in. I want to know where you are. A sudden gust of wind slams the main roll-up door of the workshop. The heavy steel groans, a sound like a distant cannon. The draft that snakes under the door is frigid. It carries the smell of the low tide, but it also carries a ghost, the sharp, clean scent of cut pine. The memory hits me like a physical blow, snapping me back 4 years, to another Christmas Eve, to the smell of that tree. That was the night Lydia held the pine branch. That was the night my father stood and watched. I am not standing still anymore. My childhood was spent in Raventon, a place obsessed with surfaces. We lived in a beige, single-story house, unremarkable except for the lawn. The lawn was Lydia's pride, a carpet of unnaturally green fescue cut with ruler-straight precision. It was a lawn that forbade running, forbade dandelions, forbade life. The inside of the house felt the same, cold, orderly, and smelling faintly of lemon polish and quiet judgment. The centerpiece of that judgment was the dining room table. It was a small, dark wood table. It had exactly 6 chairs. It was reserved for holidays and for when Graham brought home business partners. It was, Lydia always said, just the right size. 6 was, to her, the perfect number for a dinner party. It was intimate. It was manageable. But there were 4 of us. Graham, Lydia, her daughter Elise, and me. The table was not for us. It was for the people who needed to be impressed, the showable people. When it was just the 4 of us, we ate at the small laminate counter in the kitchen, perched on stools. The 6-chair table sat empty, polished, waiting for people who mattered. Elise mattered. She was Lydia's daughter in every way I was not. She was the star, where I was quiet and observed. Elise performed. She was the captain of the cheer squad, a cascade of blonde hair and bright white teeth. She was Lydia's living trophy. Every glance from my stepmother toward Elise was one of proprietary pride. All eyes in every room went to the perfect, pressed collar of Elise's cashmere sweater, to the effortless way she laughed. She was the warmth in that cold house, a curated, approved kind of fire. I was the wrong kind of fire. My place was outside, past the forbidden lawn, in the cluttered, cramped workshop behind the garage. It was my step-grandfather Silas's domain. He was Lydia's father. But he seemed like a genetic throwback, a man of grease and metal who had somehow produced a daughter of polish and glass. The workshop was my sanctuary. It was the only place in Raventon that smelled real. It smelled of pine oil solvent, of hot steel, of ozone from the welder, and the sharp, comforting tang of the angle grinder sending sparks across the concrete. Silas was a retired mechanic who saw the world in terms of what was broken and what could be fixed. He saw me, and he handed me a wrench. While Elise was practicing routines, I was learning to gap spark plugs, to true a bicycle wheel, to braze a copper pipe. He taught me how to read the world with my hands. My father, Graham, existed in the uneasy space between the house and the workshop. He saw my skills not as a virtue, but as a quirk, a strange party trick. When Lydia's friends came over, sipping Chardonnay around the 6-chair table, he would invariably try to include me. "Rowan is our little engineer," he would say, a broad, nervous smile on his face. The women would look at me, my fingernails permanently rimmed with black grease, my work jeans stiff with something. "She can weld just about anything. Fixed the mower deck last week. Saved me $100. They would offer thin smiles. Just don't ask her to sign any important papers, he would add, leaning in conspiratorially. Can't read her own handwriting. It's all chicken scratch. The polite, sharp tinkling of their laughter filled the room. Graham would smile wider, thinking he had landed the joke, thinking he had made me relatable. He never understood that their laughter felt like hot rivets, each one a painful, permanent fastening, locking me into the box they had built for me, the useful, dirty, slightly slow girl in the shed. The worst of it, always, was Christmas. Christmas Eve, when I was 14 years old. Elise was 12 and had just made the junior varsity cheer squad as a freshman, an unheard-of honor. The house was blazing with tasteful white lights. The air smelled of pine and cinnamon. The 6-chair table was set for the next day. Gleaming with silver, Lydia polished twice. We opened gifts by the tree. Elise went first. Her boxes were wrapped in soft paper, topped with elaborate bows. She opened a long velvet case. Inside was a silver necklace, delicate as a spider's web, with a tiny, glittering charm. She gasped, and Lydia beamed, fastening it around her perfect neck. "Oh, Mommy, it's beautiful." Then it was my turn. My name was on one small, flat envelope. I pulled the tab. Inside was a plastic gift card, $20, to the cheap hardware supply outlet by the highway. Tucked into the paper holder, in Lydia's precise, looping cursive, was a note. "Thought you could use this for your projects. Please try to buy some new gloves. The ones you have are staining the door handles, and please do not wear them in the living room." I stared at the red and yellow plastic card. $20. Don't be dirty. I looked up. Elise was glittering. Graham was smiling, looking at his phone. Lydia was already collecting the discarded wrapping paper, keeping the scene clean. After the gifts, Graham would pull out the video camera. "Family picture time." We would stand by the tree, Lydia, Graham, Elise, front and center, touching her new necklace. I stood on the end. "Okay, everyone squeeze in," Graham would say, his eye to the viewfinder. He would adjust the frame, the lens panning slightly, always to the right, always toward Elise. "Rowan, honey, can you lean back just a bit?" he would ask, his voice muffled. "You're blocking the light. Lean out a little." I learned to lean out. I learned to angle my shoulders back, to make myself smaller, to fade into the edge of the frame, to become part of the background, the wallpaper. I did it so well that in most of the pictures, I am not really there at all. Just an arm, a sliver of my sweater, an out-of-focus ear, a ghost at the feast. The defining motif of those Christmases was the empty chair. In the photographs, you can see it, the three of them, bright and centered, and just to the side, or sometimes visible behind Elise, the arm of another chair. There was always a space, always a gap. The table had 6 chairs. The living room had extra seating, but in the frame, there was never room. That empty space was not an invitation. It was a boundary. It was a space held for someone else, someone better, someone who wasn't me. It was a chair that was pointedly, loudly empty. I went out to the workshop later that night. The house was too bright, too cold. Silas was there, wiping down his tools, the smell of pine oil sharp in the frigid air. He didn't ask what I got. He just pointed to a pile of scrap metal in the corner. "Been meaning to build a new stand for the grinder," he said, his voice a low rumble. "That one wobbles." I nodded. I pulled my old stained gloves on, the ones Lydia hated. I fired up the welder, the sudden bright blue arc chasing the shadows from the corners. I focused on the molten puddle, the one thing in my world I could control. After a few minutes, Silas spoke, not looking at me, but at the piece of steel I was working on, glowing cherry red in the vise. "Steel is the memory of fire," he said, his voice quiet. "It never forgets what's done to it. It remembers every time it was heated, every time it was struck. It gets harder. It holds the shape you give it." He looked at me then, his eyes clear. "You have enough fire, Rowan, more than enough." I finished the weld, a clean, strong bead. I shut off the torch, the hiss of the gas. Dying. "That table in there," he said, nodding toward the house. "It's too small. It was built to keep people out. It's a coward's table." He picked up a rag and began polishing a socket wrench. "One day, you build a table. You build one long enough for all the people who got pushed to the edge. You build it out of something that lasts, something the fire remembers." I looked at the grinder stand I had just fused. It was solid. It would not wobble. In my mind, the 6 small chairs at Lydia's table shattered, and I started drafting the plans for my own. I left Raventon when I was 17. I did not ask Lydia for permission, and I did not wait for Graham's approval. I packed a single duffel bag, left a note on the immaculate kitchen counter, and drove my rusting truck until the suburbs faded into coastal highways. I enrolled at the Weld Code Institute in the industrial sector down by the port. I signed up for the night program, which ran from 6 p.m. to midnight, 5 nights a week, to pay for the tuition and my tiny rented room. I took a job as a general laborer on a commercial construction site. By day, I was a grunt. I was the lowest person on the totem pole, sweeping up slag, hauling rebar, prepping joints for the real welders, and learning to keep my mouth shut and my eyes open. I was invisible, just another hard hat in the crowd. But at night, the world changed. In the isolation of the welding booth, under the intense, focused blue-white light, I was learning a new language. It was an alphabet of fire. It started with SMA, shielded metal arc welding, stick welding. It's the old school. It's dirty, loud, and unforgiving. It smells of ozone and burnt flux. I spent weeks just learning to strike an arc, to tap the rod against the plate without it sticking fast. I learned to control the molten puddle, to feel the rhythm of the machine through the electrode, to maintain the perfect arc length. Then came GTAW, gas tungsten arc, what everyone calls TIG. This was not brute force. This was surgery. The torch in one hand, the foot pedal controlling the amperage, and a thin filler rod fed by hand into the puddle. It was quiet, just the faint hiss of the argon shielding gas. It demanded absolute stillness, perfect hand-eye coordination. It was the craft of precision, creating welds so clean they looked like a stack of dimes. It was the antithesis of Lydia's world. There was no faking it. The weld was either pure or it was contaminated. Finally, we learned FCOW, flux cord arc welding. This was the workhorse, a wire fed automatically through a gun, burning hot and fast, laying down a lot of metal with deep penetration. This was the tool for heavy structural steel, the bones of buildings and bridges. I studied metallurgy charts on my lunch breaks. I learned to read welding symbols on blueprints. I saved my money, buying better boots, a better hood. Then came the certification test. My American Welding Society, D1.1 certification, structural steel. It is the bar exam for welders. The test is not written. You weld a 1-inch thick piece of steel in the vertical and overhead positions. The 2 hardest ways to fight gravity. Then they take your work, cut it into strips, and put it in a hydraulic press. They bend your weld backward, trying to tear it apart. I watched the inspector, a gray-haired man who had seen it all, place my test coupon in the bender. The hydraulics groaned, the steel bent, folding over on itself until it was flat. It did not crack. It did not snap. The weld held. He pulled it out, looked at it, then looked at me. He stamped my papers, my name, Rowan Hale, printed next to Certified Structural Welder. It was the first document in my life that told the absolute truth about me. On my first job as a certified welder, I was on a retrofit crew, strengthening an old manufacturing plant. I was the youngest, the only woman. One afternoon, a senior journeyman, Ricky, was setting up on a platform 2 levels up. He was prepping to weld a new beam support right next to an old, heavy conduit junction. I was his firewatch. On the ground, I saw his setup. He was focused on his ground clamp. I was looking at the panel box 50 feet away. The breaker wasn't locked. The tag was missing. "Ricky!" I yelled up. "Hold up! Is that circuit dead?" He waved me off, annoyed. It's fine, kid. Maintenance said they killed the whole sector. I don't see a I yelled back. I don't have time for this, he grumbled, and raised his stinger to tack the brace. I did not argue. I ran. I grabbed the main disconnect for that sector, a heavy lever, and slammed it down. I jammed my personal padlock through the bar, clicked it shut, and snapped my red "Danger Do Not Operate" tag onto the shackle. I signed my name on it, as procedure dictates. 3 seconds later, another contractor on a different floor, unaware of our work, tried to flip that same breaker back on to run a concrete saw. The lever held. The circuit stayed dead. Ricky froze. He understood exactly what had just happened. He had been seconds away from grounding himself to a live, high-amperage junction. He slowly climbed down the ladder, his face pale. His hands were shaking. He started. I just pointed at my tag on the panel. Lockout, tag out. It's the procedure. The site foreman had watched the entire exchange. He walked over, looked at my tag, looked at Ricky, then looked at me. He just nodded. Once. My status on that site changed instantly. I was no longer the kid. I was Hale. My first time on high steel was terrifying. I was 65 feet up, walking a 6-inch wide beam. The wind up there is different. It does not blow around you. It tries to peel you off. The ground looked a mile away. My hands, deep inside my leather gloves, were trembling. I could feel the sweat running down my back. I had to make a full penetration groove weld on a moment connection. It was not a repair. It was a primary structural joint, holding the horizontal beam to the vertical column. It was a weld that held the floor up, a weld that could not fail. I double-clipped my safety harness to the static line. I braced myself against the column. I took a deep breath, dropped my hood, and struck the arc. I forced my hands to be steady. I focused on nothing but the molten puddle, a tiny, brilliant sun under my control. I burned the root pass, hot and deep, fusing the 2 plates. I cleaned the slag. I ran the fill passes, weaving the torch back and forth, filling the gap. Then the cap, a smooth, consistent bead. When I finished, I signaled for the inspection. The foreman climbed up, moving along the beam like it was a sidewalk. He pulled out his flashlight and inspection mirror. He checked the penetration, the tie-in at the edges, the bead profile. He spent a long time looking. Finally, he stood up and keyed his radio, his voice crackling across the site. "Clean pass, Hale." That was it. That was all. It was more praise than Graham had given me in 20 years. At 22, I cashed out every cent I had saved. I bought a used silver F-250 flatbed, a diesel-powered Lincoln Mobile welder, and a set of heavy-duty tool chests. I had forge and tied metalworks painted on the doors. I was a mobile rig, a one-woman shop. I was my own boss. I took the jobs no one else wanted, repairing rusted-out trawler hulls at 2 a.m, in the rain, fixing broken farm equipment in muddy fields, welding harvester tines back together, fabricating stainless steel range hoods for restaurants. It was brutal, exhausting work. It was absolute freedom. At 25, I got my first big contract. Hurricane Anya had smashed the coast. The North Jetty cold storage facility, a massive concrete warehouse complex, had taken a direct hit. The storm surge had undermined the foundations, and the main structural supports were failing. It was a complex, high-stakes reinforcement job. I bid low and smart. My engineering proposal was sound. I got it. For 3 solid months, I lived on that site. I designed custom steel jackets to reinforce the failing concrete columns. I fabricated them in my temporary shop, and my small crew and I welded them into place, working around the clock, in and out with the tides. We finished the reinforcement 2 weeks ahead of schedule. We had 0 safety incidents. The county inspector's report came back flawless. Forge and Tide was no longer just a truck. It was a reputation. I kept a log of every job, not just invoices, a welding log. In hardbound notebooks, I recorded the material specifications, the ambient temperature, the voltage and amperage settings, the wire feed speed. the shielding gas mixture, the lot number on the filler rods. Graham used to say my handwriting was chicken scratch. He was wrong. I was writing in a language he could not read. My logs were meticulous, precise, technical. They were the journals of an engineer. Even if I did not have the degree, they were my proof. At 26, with the profit from the North Jetty contract, I bought a piece of land everyone said was worthless. A rocky, wind-blasted cliffside plot in Stormbreak Cove, overlooking the bay. They said it was unbuildable, too exposed, that the salt spray would eat any house in a decade. They were thinking in wood. I was thinking in steel. I decided to build Hearthline House. I spent a full year just on the design, teaching myself advanced corrosion control. I specified hot-dip galvanized steel for the entire primary frame. Every beam, every column, every W-flange was fabricated in my shop and then trucked to the galvanizer, where it was dipped in a bath of molten zinc. I designed the connections to shed water. Every single structural bolt was an ASTM A325 hot-dip galvanized bolt, and I tightened each one myself with a calibrated torque wrench to the exact foot-pound specification required by my prints. I kept the torque spec sheets in a file, just like my weld logs. I built it myself, with one apprentice. I hired a crane operator for one day to set the main frame. It rose from the bedrock, a skeleton of indestructible gray metal, ready for the wind, ready for the salt. When the frame was up, before the walls went on, I took a small, thick piece of scrap plate. I took my TIG torch and ran two simple, perfect, parallel beads of weld onto it. Not words, just two lines. Then I took a set of metal punches and hammered letters into the oak threshold by the front door, where only I would see them. Who works? Who sits? I did not post a single picture on social media. I sent no announcements to Raventon. I let them all think I was still the dirty kid fixing tractors in the mud. Hearthline House was my secret. It was my fortress. It was like aging wine in a dark cellar. You do not open it until it is ready. You wait for the right night, for the moment it will mean the most. It was 4 years ago. I was 26. Hearthline House was framed but not finished, and the North Jetty contract had just been paid out. I was, for the first time in my life, solvent. I was a business owner. I was proud. Then came the text from Graham. Not a call, a text. Lydia wants the family here for Christmas Eve. Please, Rowan, just for appearances. Don't make it difficult. Don't make it difficult. That was my job title in the family. I drove the 2 hours from Stormbreak Cove back to the beige, manicured prison of Raventon. I parked my work truck, the one with the Forge and Tide logo on the door, a block away so Lydia would not complain about the sight of it. I walked in, and the performance was already in progress. The house was aggressively warm. It smelled of simmering cinnamon and hot pine, a manufactured, aerosol comfort. The tree, a massive Fraser fir, stood in the living room, suffocated in gold lights and glass ornaments. Lydia, in a red cashmere dress, glided toward me. She did not hug me. She stopped 2 feet away, her eyes scanning me, cataloging my failures. I was wearing clean jeans and a new wool sweater, but it did not matter. "Rowan," she said, her voice a tight smile. "Your coat, it's one of your work coats, isn't it?" "It's a Carhartt, Lydia. It's clean." "It's going to stain the armchair. It looks like it smells of metal. Please, just leave it in the garage where it belongs." I took it off and put it in the garage. The first cut. I was already an outcast, an industrial contaminant. I walked back in. Graham was there, giving me a quick, pained nod before turning his attention to the main event. Elise. She was 22, home from her final year of college, and she was glowing. Her new fiancé, the son of a local banker, was beside her, looking polished and vacant. "Elise has an announcement," Lydia trilled, clapping her perfect hands. Elise held up her left hand, a diamond, at least 2 carats. Flashed under the spotlights, Lydia had aimed at the tree. "We're engaged." The room erupted. Graham rushed to hug her, his voice thick. My little girl! Lydia was crying, dabbing her eyes with a perfect linen cocktail napkin. It was a beautiful scene. It was a perfect tableau. They drank champagne. I drank water. After the excitement died down, Graham turned to me, an obligatory gesture. So, Rowan, still fixing things? Down at the coast? I just completed the North Jetty reinforcement project. Actually, I said, trying to find a foothold in the conversation. It was a 3-month structural stabilization. We finished ahead of schedule. Lydia let out a small, tinkling laugh. Oh, that's so nice, dear. She turned to the banker's parents. Rowan is just so handy. She's a welder. She said the word welder like it was a minor but persistent skin condition. Do you even call them projects, honey? I just thought you fixed tractors and things. It was a multi-million-dollar county contract. Lydia, I said, my voice quiet. Always so serious, she laughed, dismissing me with a wave. The trigger, when it came, was not from Lydia. It was from Elise. She was, as always, documenting her perfect life for her thousands of social media followers. She was walking around with her phone, filming her ring, the tree, the champagne glasses. She did a quick pan of the room, narrating, "So happy to be home with my real family, where everything is just so beautiful and clean." One of her friends commented on the live video, and Elise read it aloud. "Someone's asking who else is here," she laughed, a high, careless sound. Then she flipped the camera, zoomed in on my hands, which were resting on my lap. My nails were short and clean, but my knuckles were scarred. They are the hands of someone who works. "Oh," Elise said, laughing into her phone. "That's just the help." The room went silent, except for the tiny, tinny sound of Christmas music. I stood up. "Take that down, Elise." "Oh my God. Rowan, it was a joke. Why are you always so sensitive?" "I'm not the help. I'm your sister. Take it down." Lydia stepped between us, her face a mask of cold fury. The party was threatened. The scene was cracking. "Rowan, you will not be dramatic. You will not ruin your sister's engagement night. After everything we have done for you, you come in here with your dirty boots and your chip on your shoulder." "I'm not wearing boots," I said, my voice dangerously level. "And I'm not ashamed of my hands. You are." "You're damn right I am," she shrieked. The mask was gone. "You bring your dirt into this house. You embarrass us in front of our friends. You embarrass your father." I looked at Graham. He was standing by the fireplace, his champagne flute frozen halfway to his mouth. He was staring at the carpet, at a spot just to my left. "Dad?" I asked. He would not look at me. "He's ashamed of you too," Lydia screamed. And then she snapped. She grabbed the nearest branch on the over-decorated tree. It was a thick lower bough, heavy with ornaments. She yanked it. The entire tree shuddered. Glass balls smashed on the hardwood floor. "You want to talk about dirt?" she yelled, and she swung the branch hard. "I am 26 years old. I am not a child. I am an adult. I am, from years of lifting steel plate and hauling welding cable, significantly stronger than she is." I did not hit her back. I raised my right arm to block my face. The branch connected with my forearm. It was not a soft brushing of needles. It was a blow. The stiff, woody part of the branch struck bone, pine needles, sharp as glass shards, raked across my skin. She swung again, a frantic, ugly motion. She hit me on the shoulder, the force of it staggering me back a step. I did not yell. I did not engage. I took one more step back, putting me out of her reach. My hands were not shaking. I am a welder. My hands are my life. They do not shake. I reached into my back pocket and pulled out my phone. I unlocked it. I swiped to the camera. I pressed the red record button. The small digital timer began to tick up. I held the phone up, steady, framing her. "It is 9:14 p.m. on December 24th, I said. My voice was calm, clear, the voice I use on a job site during an inspection. "I am at 1224 Sycamore Drive, Raventon. My name is Rowan Hale. Lydia Hale is assaulting me with a Christmas tree branch." Lydia froze. Her arm was raised for another strike, the branch dripping tinsel. Her mouth was open. Elise had her own phone out, but it was lowered, her face pale. The only sound in the room was the quiet, stupid jingle of silver bells playing from a hidden speaker. I panned the camera, slowly, deliberately, from Lydia's contorted face to my father. He was still by the fireplace. He was a statue. He was staring at the broken glass on the floor. His face pale, his jaw clenched. He was doing nothing. He was saying nothing. He was watching. His silence was a roar, a confirmation, a signature on her every action. He would not look at the camera. He would not look at me. Then, a sharp, insistent knocking at the front door. A neighbor, Mrs. Davies. She must have heard the screaming, the crash of the ornaments. The transformation in Lydia was instantaneous. It was terrifying. The rage vanished in a microsecond. Vacuum sealed. She dropped the branch as if it were on fire. She smoothed her hair, straightened her red dress. She glided to the door, a bright, brittle social smile plastered on her face. She opened it a crack. "Oh, hello, Mrs. Davies. Merry Christmas." Her voice was warm, buttery. "So lovely to see you." "Oh, that. Just a silly family game. We got a little rowdy. You know how it gets when the children are home. Everything is just wonderful. You have a blessed night." She closed the door. The mask was back on. She turned to me, her eyes dead. I stopped recording. I pressed save. The video file was secure. I looked at Lydia. I looked at Elise. Then I looked at my father. He finally met my eyes. For 1 second, he did not look ashamed. He did not look concerned. He looked annoyed. I was the problem. I had broken the scene. "I'm leaving," I said. I walked out the front door. I did not get in my truck. I walked 3 blocks, under the perfect, tasteful streetlights of Raventon, to the 24-hour gas station on the main road. The fluorescent lights inside were white, buzzing, and unforgiving. I went into the public restroom and locked the door. I rolled up the sleeve of my sweater. My forearm was already changing color. It was covered in angry red welts and long, deep scratches from the needles. A dark, plum-colored bruise was already rising on my shoulder, a perfect map of the branch. I turned on my phone's camera. This was not a selfie. This was documentation. This was procedure. I took a picture of my driver's license, my face and name clear. In the next shot, I held the license directly next to the bruises on my arm. This established identity and scale. I took a close-up. I took a wide shot. I made sure the location services and timestamp metadata were enabled in the file. I photographed my shoulder, twisting to get the angle. I captured every mark under that harsh, sterile, truthful light. I did not drive back to Stormbreak Cove. I drove to the Raventon Police Precinct. The lobby was empty, smelling of stale coffee and disinfectant. The desk sergeant looked up from his computer, bored. "I need to file an assault report," I said. He sighed, picking up a clipboard. "Domestic?" "Assault," I corrected him, firmly. I stated the facts. I gave him my name, the perpetrator's name, Lydia Hale, the address, the time, and the witness. My father, Graham Hale, witnessed the entire event. He was typing slowly. She said, "Not much we can do on Christmas Eve, miss." "I have evidence," I said. I took out my phone. I showed him the video. His expression changed. I showed him the time-stamped photographs of my arm. I airdropped the video file and the high-resolution images directly to his official police email. I watched him save them. He was no longer bored. I went to the 24-hour urgent care clinic 2 blocks away. I got a medical exam. The doctor noted the multiple contusions and abrasions consistent with being struck by a foreign object. I got a copy of his signed report. I took that report back to the police station. The sergeant handed me a printed receipt. On it was a case number, an official, permanent, searchable file number. I drove back to Hearthline House. The sun was coming up as I crossed the bridge into Stormbreak Cove. I did not post the video. I did not send the pictures to Graham or Elise. I did not call a lawyer. I took the printed police receipt with its case number. I took the signed medical report. I backed up the video file and the photos to an encrypted, cloud-based server, and then again to a solid-state drive. I put the physical papers and the hard drive into my fireproof safe, the same one where I keep my AWS certifications, my business incorporation documents, and the deed to my land. When steel is subjected to intense stress, like the heat of an arc, you cannot put it immediately into service. It's brittle. It's full of internal tension. It has to rest. It has to cool slowly, to normalize. I let the evidence sit. I let the steel rest in the mold, waiting for its new, harder shape to set. The file I named Seat 01 was saved. Lydia's text, and my father's scene, sat vibrating on the steel table. 4 years. That is how long the file from the Raventon Police Precinct had sat in my safe. 4 years of silence, not a word exchanged, not a single holiday text, not a birthday card. My silence was not emptiness. It was the sound of work. It was the high-frequency scream of the plasma cutter. It was the steady, rhythmic stacking of beads on a vertical weld. It was the sound of concrete being poured into forms I had built. In that silence, I built the harbor span, the project that Lydia's text message had just interrupted. It was the largest contract Forge and Tide had ever landed. It was not a glamorous piece of architecture. It was a utility bridge. It connected the old fishing village, a row of houses on the tidal flats, to the main town. It meant the families there would not be cut off from the bus line, from the grocery store. Every time a winter storm surged, it was a bridge for the forgotten. I had fabricated every truss, inspected every weld, and personally torqued the final bolts on the main arch yesterday. Lydia's text was a perfect, crystalline piece of timing, an invitation to remain invisible, arriving just as I completed the most visible work of my life. Just the small, immediate family. I picked up the phone. I did not text her back. I opened my contacts. I went to a different list. I picked up one of my engineering notebooks, the hardbound ones with the grid paper. I turned past the metallurgy tables, past the load calculations for the bridge. I opened to a clean page. I wrote the long table at the top. This was not a party I was planning. It was an assembly. I began my invitation list. It was not a list of my friends. It was a list of the people who, like me, did not fit, the ones who were defined by what they did, not who they knew. The first name? Anya Petrova. She runs the salty bread bakery down on the wharf, in a tiny shop that always smells of yeast and cardamom. Her husband was a fisherman, lost in a gale 3 years back. She starts her ovens at 2 a.m. and works until her 2 children get out of school. She is always tired and always kind. She is never invited to the Raventon-style holiday mixers at the yacht club. Kenji Tanaka. He is the lead rescue diver for the county search and rescue team. He is the man they call when a boat sinks in the cold, dark water. He is quiet, methodical, and carries the weight of the things he has seen. He spends his free time fixing the engines in the older fishermen's boats, often for free. Mrs. Albright. She was my guidance counselor at Raventon High, a woman with sharp eyes who wore practical shoes. When I told her I wanted to be a welder, she was the only adult who did not try to talk me out of it. She just pulled up my aptitude scores and said, "Rowan, your mechanical spatial reasoning is in the 99th percentile. Go be the best one." She retired to a small cottage here last year. She lives alone. Maria, my closest neighbor, a single mother who works the night shift as an ER nurse at the regional hospital. Her son, Leo, is 8. I added 4 more. The old boatwright who still caulks hulls by hand. The town's high school music teacher, who drives a 20-year-old car and runs a free instrument program on the side. My old mentor, Silas. I wrote 9 names. I took out my phone and sent 9 individual text messages. No group chat. Each one was identical. This is Rowan Hale. I am hosting a dinner on Christmas Eve, 7 p.m., at my house, Hearthline. It is for people who work hard, who are tired, and who have ever been left without a seat. If that is you, Please come. The replies came back within the hour. 9 for 9. We will be there. Thank you, Rowan. What can I bring? This was a project. It required a build plan. First, the food. This could not be the cold, delicate, performative food of Lydia's table. This had to be food that felt like a furnace. I called Mike Finnegan. He's an old construction buddy, a pipeline welder whose knees gave out. He runs a food truck now called The Crucible, specializing in open-fire cooking. Mike, it's Hale. I need you for a private event on the 24th. Christmas Eve? That's double time, Rowan. I'll pay triple, and I want the big menu, the hearty one. There was a pause. Mike knew my story. Most of the tradespeople in this town knew. You're finally setting that table, aren't you? I am, I said. Understood. I'll bring the coastal rig. We set the menu in 5 minutes. No tiny skewers or delicate pastries. We would have platters of shellfish, mussels and clams from the cove, roasted over hardwood with garlic butter, a deep pot of white bean and sausage soup, thick crust bread from Anya's brick oven, which she insisted on contributing. It was food that required napkins, not doilies. Next, the seating, my own table, the long sassafras slab, was the centerpiece, but it was not enough. I went into the workshop. I took 3 lengths of 2-inch heavy wall angle iron from the rack. I cut them to size, ground the edges clean, and fired up my welder. In an hour, I had fabricated the structural legs for 2 long, sturdy benches. For the tops, I used reclaimed planks from the Old Town Pier. Timber that was scarred and silvered by decades of salt and storms. I sanded them just enough to remove the splinters, but not the history. They were strong. They were honest. Then, the environment. This could not be a cold, formal dining room. I strung up heavy-duty lines of Edison bulbs over the wide deck, the kind with the warm, visible filaments. I wanted the glow of a workshop, not a showroom. This was a safety issue as much as an aesthetic one. I ran the power from a new, dedicated 20-amp breaker. I checked the connections, all marine grade, waterproof. I ran the grounding wire to a copper rod driven 8 feet into the earth. I calculated the total electrical load for the lights and Mike's truck. I was at 75% of capacity. Safe, secure. Finally, the gifts. The invitation said, "No gifts," but I was the host. My gifts would not be expensive. Polished status symbols like Elise's necklace. They would be functional. They would be respectful. For Kenji, the diver, a high lumen, waterproof tactical flashlight rated for 500 feet. For Anya, the baker, a set of high-carbon steel bench scrapers she had complained she could not find. For Mrs. Albright, a beautiful, leather-bound edition of a book on the engineering of ancient bridges. For Maria's son, Leo, a perfect, gleaming Hohner harmonica in the key of C. For Silas, a new pair of fleece-lined, American-made deerskin work gloves. For the old boatwright, a set of Japanese pull saws. I put each one in a simple box. I did not use wrapping paper. I tied them with chalk line. When the work was done, I took a last piece of 1/4-inch steel plate. I took my letter punches, the heavy steel stamps, and a hammer. I began to strike the letters, one by one, driving them deep into the metal. The sound rang out through the shop, sharp and clear. I hammered out 2 lines. Who comes has a seat. Who speaks is heard. I drilled 2 holes in the top and hung the sign by the entrance to Hearthline House, where everyone would see it. One last detail. I am a planner. I build for worst-case scenarios. I build to withstand hurricanes. I knew Lydia. I knew Graham. I knew that word of this dinner would get back to them, and I knew they would see it as a transgression. They might come. They might try to create a scene. I was not 26 anymore. I was not trapped. This was my land. This was my house, built on a foundation of steel I had set myself. I opened my phone. I scrolled to the contact for Sarah Jenkins. She is a community lawyer who specializes in harassment claims and protective orders. I had met her when Forge and Tide sponsored a scholarship for women entering the trades. I had her personal number. I put the phone in my pocket. My hand was steady. The contingency was in place. The table was set. The steel was ready. The sun set early, as it does in December, pulling the light from the sky and leaving a deep, bruised purple over the bay. The steel frame of Hearthline House stood black against it. Then I flipped the switch. The Edison bulbs strung over the deck flickered to life, a constellation of warm, orange light that pushed back the cold dark. Mike Finnegan's rig was already in place, the scent of hardwood smoke, apple and oak, curling into the salt air. At 7 o'clock on the dot, the first headlights cut through the darkness on my long gravel drive. They arrived in clusters, not in gleaming luxury cars, but in sensible, dented trucks and hatchbacks. Anya Petrova came first, carrying a wooden crate. Her hands, when she set it down, were dusted with a fine white powder. Flour caught in her cuticles. She had brought 3 massive, round loaves of sourdough, the crusts so dark they were almost black, still warm from her ovens. "I brought extra," she said, her voice quiet. "Just in case." Kenji Tanaka and the old boatwright, Mr. Eames, came together. Kenji's hair was still damp, smelling of salt and neoprene from a late dive. He carried a small, chilled box. Inside were a dozen oysters, harvested that afternoon, resting on a bed of seaweed. Mr. Eames, his knuckles swollen with arthritis, held a small jar of pickled herring, his own recipe. Maria, the nurse, came with her son, Leo. She looked exhausted, her eyes still holding the fluorescent shadow of the hospital, but she was smiling. Leo was vibrating with the energy of an 8-year-old, clutching a battered mandolin case. He was a student of the music teacher, Mr. Henderson, who arrived just behind them. Soon, the deck was full. It was not the sound of a Raventon party, the high, sharp clinking of champagne flutes and forced laughter. This was a deeper sound, a murmur of relief, the sound of tools being set down. The table I had built, the long sassafras slab, was instantly transformed. It was no longer just a piece of furniture, it was a landscape. Anya's bread sat next to Kenji's oysters. Someone had brought a wheel of sharp cheese. Someone else, a crock of dark honey. The marks from the bread knives were already crisscrossing the wood. Small piles of coarse sea salt, spilled from a grinder, crystallized on the surface, glittering like tiny diamonds in the warm light. And then, Leo. Seeing Mr. Henderson shyly unclipped his case, he pulled out the mandolin. He sat on one of the benches I had welded and began to play. A simple, hesitant folk tune. The high, clear notes wove through the smoke and the sound of the ocean. A thin, brave thread of music. Everyone found a place. They gravitated toward the benches, squeezing in, shoulders touching. Mr. Eames sat near the center, right by the fire. I watched him run a hand over the smooth, sanded wood of the bench, then the table. Mike Finnegan plated the food on heavy ceramic platters, the roasted shellfish, gleaming with garlic butter, the thick, steaming white bean soup. He set them down, and I took my place, not at the head of the table, but in the middle, across from Silas. I looked at the faces, at Anya, her face soft in the firelight, at Kenji, who was actually smiling, at Mrs. Albright, who was watching Leo play, her eyes bright. I raised my glass of water, the talking quieted, the mandolin faded. They all looked at me, waiting for the speech, the grand welcome, the pronouncement. I gave them 4 words. "Thank you for coming." That was all. I took a sip, and then, as if a switch had been thrown, the dam broke. Everyone began to talk, to pass the platters. They served themselves. They tore at the bread with their hands. They reached across each other, not with polite distance, but with the easy familiarity of a busy workshop. And they told their stories. They did not talk about their successes. They talked about the judgments. Mr. Eames, his voice a gravelly rumble, told of a relative's wedding where he was asked to use the side entrance because his hands, permanently stained with boat varnish, might upset the bride's pictures. Anya spoke of a parent-teacher conference where the teacher, looking at her flour-dusted apron, had asked condescendingly if her children even had time to read at home, with her work being so physical. Mr. Henderson, the music teacher, laughed and told us how his own family, all lawyers, still introduced him as the one who plays the guitar, still figuring things out. He was 52. It was a chorus of dismissal. The room was full of people who had been told, in 1,000 small, cruel ways, that their work, their hands, their lives were not enough, not polished enough, not quiet enough, not rich enough. As the talk flowed, the roles shifted. Kenji, the quiet diver, saw Leo looking at his gear bag. He pulled out a yellow neoprene life vest, a professional grade one. "Want to see how the buckles work?" he asked. Soon, Leo was happily encased in the vest, marching proudly around the deck. Kenji was on one knee, patiently showing him the CO2 cartridge, his voice low and serious, treating the boy's curiosity with professional respect. In the corner, Mr. Henderson had taken the mandolin from Leo. He was showing Maria, the nurse, a simple G chord. Her fingers, so adept at finding a vein, were clumsy on the fretboard. She was laughing, a real, untired laugh. "My hands don't bend that way," she said. "They will," he promised. Everyone had a purpose. There were no guests. There were only participants. The wind from the cove was sharp, but the big outdoor fireplace, the one I had framed in 1/4-inch steel plate, was throwing a massive wave of heat. The metal was a deep, radiant black, and the firelight reflected in every glass, on every face, in every set of eyes. It was a shared warmth. I saw a phone. It was Mrs. Albright. She was holding it low, not making a show of it. She was secretly filming. She panned. Just for a moment, 20 seconds, maybe. She captured the long, crowded table. She caught the reflection of the waves beyond the deck railing. She caught the cascade of lights, and she caught Kenji smiling as he adjusted the vest on Leo. Then, she put it away. I knew, in that moment, that the video was already in the air, traveling. I knew it would land in the inboxes of her old colleagues in Raventon, that it would be forwarded. The image of this table, this gathering of the help, would find its way to my father's extended family. The scene, this time, was mine. Mr. Eames, the old boatwright, leaned over to me, his breath smelling of herring and soup. He put a calloused, varnish-stained hand on my arm. "You know, Rowan," he said, his voice thick. "I've been to a lot of Christmas dinners in my 80 years, dozens. At every single one, they put me at the end. The wobbly card table, the seat by the kitchen door, the edge." He looked down the long, crowded, noisy table, at Maria laughing and Anya arguing happily with Silas about bread. "This," he said, patting the sassafras slab, "is the first time in my entire life I have ever been asked to sit in the middle." I let the meal settle. I let the conversations find their natural end. When the plates were empty and the soup pot was scraped clean, I stood up and walked to the boxes I had stacked by the door. I brought them over. "These are not gifts," I said, cutting through the chatter. "They are tools." I handed them out, one by one. I had tied a small, metal-rimmed shipping tag to each one. I gave Silas his deerskin gloves. He read the tag I had written, "For the hands that taught mine." He did not say anything, but he slowly pulled them on, flexing his fingers, his eyes meeting mine. I gave Anya her bench scrapers. She read the tag. "To keep the best edges sharp," she laughed, a short, surprised bark, and held one up, testing its weight. I gave Kenji the flashlight. His tag said, "For the man who goes into the dark." He turned it over, felt the O-ring seals, and nodded, a sign of deep professional approval. I gave Leo his harmonica, his tag, "Make good noise." He ripped the box open and immediately blew a loud, discordant, joyful blast. His mother did not shush him. They opened them not with the polite reverence of a Raventon Christmas, but with the critical eyes of craftspeople. They tested the balance, checked the materials, admired the utility. These calloused, scarred, capable hands were opening these boxes as if they were reading a letter from an old friend, one who understood them perfectly. When the last box was open, a new quiet settled over the deck. It was not an awkward silence. It was a full one. The conversations were done. The food was eaten. The work was finished. No one moved to leave. No one applauded. There was no need. The only sound was the deep, rhythmic sigh of the ocean breaking on the rocks below Hearthline House. It was the sound of the tide coming in, steady and relentless. It was the sound of the world breathing. And for tonight, it was enough. It was Christmas morning, 9 a.m. The deck was quiet, swept clean of last night's feast. The air was frigid, sharp with salt, but the sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue. I was sitting at the long sassafras table, my hands wrapped around a hot mug of black coffee, looking out at the harbor span. The new bridge arched over the water, gleaming in the morning light, solid and real. Maria, the ER nurse, sat across from me. Her shift at the hospital had ended at 7. She had stopped by on her way home, still in her scrubs, holding her own mug. We were not talking. We were just sitting in the shared, comfortable silence of the previous night. My phone, lying face down on the table, began to vibrate. It was not a polite buzz. It was a frantic, angry rattle against the wood. It sounded like a trapped wasp. I looked at Maria. She raised an eyebrow. I turned the phone over. The screen was lit up. Graham Hale. "This," I said, my voice flat, "is the other side." I picked up the phone. I pressed accept, and then I pressed speaker. Maria set her coffee mug down, her hands folding in her lap. She was now a witness. "Rowan?" Graham's voice was thin, choked with a panic I had never heard before. "Rowan, are you there? You have to—" He was cut off. A shriek, high-pitched and full of venom, blasted from the speaker, making me flinch. It was Lydia. "You did this, you worthless, ungrateful bitch! Do you have any idea what you have done?" A third voice, whimpering. "Elise. Rowan. Why? Why would you do that? Mrs. Albright posted a video. It's everywhere. Everyone is calling. Everyone is looking at us." Graham's voice returned, trying to sound authoritative over the chaos. "Rowan, you have made this family a complete laughingstock. You held some kind of freak show, a party for all the town's cast-offs, just to humiliate us. You embarrassed us in front of all our friends." I took a slow sip of my coffee. The liquid was hot, bitter, and real. Maria just watched me, her gaze steady. "Good morning. Graham, Lydia, Elise." "Do not good morning us," Lydia screamed. "You think this is funny? You think it's clever? Holding a pity party for yourself?" "It was not a pity party. Lydia," I said, my voice as calm and level as the horizon. "I did not think about you at all. I just invited the people that you and Dad, and all of Raventon, have spent your entire lives pretending not to see." I leaned in, my voice dropping, but the speaker carried it clearly. "Last night was about seats. Lydia, it was about filling the empty chairs. It had nothing to do with your faces." There was a choking sound, a gasp of pure, frustrated rage. "And that house," Lydia finally spat out, shifting her attack. "That monstrosity you built. Who do you think you are? Building that thing on the cliff like some kind of queen. Showing off. Rubbing your dirty money in our faces." The attack on my house was a mistake. She had moved from the realm of emotion, which was her weapon, to the realm of facts, which was mine. "It is not a monstrosity," I said, my voice hardening. The steel was coming up. "It is my home. I designed it. I engineered it. And I fabricated it. I am not showing off. Lydia, I am living." "My money is not dirty," I continued, each word a separate, measured drop. "Every dollar that went into this foundation, every beam of steel, every single galvanized bolt, was paid for with income from contracts I won and work I completed. It is all documented. It is all on my tax returns, which, unlike yours, are perfectly, boringly transparent. Every joint in this frame is inspected. Every footing is permitted by the county. Forge and Tide is a licensed, bonded, and insured structural engineering firm. This house is built on auditable work. Lydia, not on appearances. A dead, thick silence filled the line. I had answered her hysteria with a balance sheet. Then, Graham. He tried to pivot, to find footing on the shifting sand. "Rowan, this is not about taxes," he stammered, his voice weak. It's about loyalty. It's about respect. After everything, you just hold on to things. That night, 4 years ago, you were so difficult. Lydia was upset. He was evading. He was trying to blur the past, to paint it gray. 4 years ago, I said. My voice went cold. The air on the deck felt 10 degrees colder. Maria sat up straighter. "Are you finally ready to talk about 4 years ago, Dad?" "Now, Rowan, listen," he said, trying that old, placating tone. "Don't dredge up the past. It was a family argument. It was Christmas. You were both—" "Silas always told me something," I cut him off. He said, "Rowan, you never flip a main breaker until you are absolutely certain the entire line is ready to hold the load. But when it's ready, you don't hesitate. You flip it. You let the power run." "I am flipping the breaker, Dad." "Rowan, don't." It was 9:14 p.m. on December 24th. 4 years ago, I said, my voice the monotone of an inspector reading a report. Lydia grabbed a branch from the Christmas tree and assaulted me with it. She struck me twice. You were standing by the fireplace. You watched her do it, and you said nothing. "How dare you?" Lydia shrieked. "That is a lie. You stumbled. You were—" "It is not a lie," I said. "I have the video, Lydia, the one I recorded on my phone, the one where I clearly state the date, the time, and the address, 1224 Sycamore Drive, the one where you are frozen, your arm raised, holding the branch, the one where I pan the camera to Dad, and he stares at the floor, refusing to look at me." Graham made a small, strangled sound. "I have the time-stamped photographs I took in the gas station restroom. 20 minutes later," I continued, relentless, showing the multiple contusions on my right forearm and the abrasions on my left shoulder. "I have the signed medical report from Dr. Patel at the Raventon Urgent Care Clinic, dated that same night, documenting the injuries as consistent with being struck by a foreign object." Elise was openly sobbing now. A medical report? Oh my God." "And Dad," I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper, "I have the official police report, Raventon Police Department, case number 74-9928, assault. I filed it at 10:30 p.m. That night, I sat with the desk sergeant and I airdropped him the video file, the photo set, and a scan of the medical exam. It is all there, a permanent public record. It has been sitting in a file for 1,460 days. So do not, ever, talk to me about dredging up the past. I am the only one who bothered to document it." Absolute, crushing silence. I could hear Elise's quiet, horrified crying. I could hear Lydia's ragged, sharp breathing. I could hear Graham, not breathing at all. You went to the police?" he finally whispered. It was the whisper of a man seeing the beam he was standing on crack in half. And then, a new sound, a different voice, tinny and electronic, from their end. "Graham? Graham, who are you talking to? Why is that woman screaming?" Elise gasped. "Oh my God, Grandma's on the video call. Dad, hang up now." "Mother, not now," Graham said, his voice frantic. "This is a private, "It's not private if I can hear it in the nursing home," the voice snapped. It was old, frail, but sharp as tungsten. It was Helen, my paternal grandmother, Graham's mother. "Is that Rowan?" Helen demanded. Graham, let me talk to her. Mother, this is not. I saw the video Mrs. Albright posted this morning. Graham, she sent it to all her old Raventon friends. A beautiful table. Rowan, looked like real, honest work. Looked like your grandfather's table. Helen, you don't understand what she did, Lydia screeched, recovering. She's trying to. I understand perfectly. Lydia, Helen cut her off. I understand you're yelling at her because she hosted a dinner for working people. I understand you're angry you got caught. Graham, you told me she just drifted away. You told me she was too busy for the family. You never told me you stood by and watched your wife beat her. Mother, it was not a beating, Graham yelled, his voice cracking. It was an argument. I heard what the girl said, Helen replied, her voice dangerously calm. A police report, a medical exam. That's the part you're ashamed of, isn't it, Graham? Not that it happened. You are ashamed that she documented it. The line went dead quiet. Even Elise's crying stopped. The shame isn't because the girl hosted a party, Graham, Helen said, her voice echoing from the nursing home room. The shame is because you stood there and watched your child get hit, and you did nothing. You are a coward. The silence that followed was not an absence of noise. It was a physical thing. It was the sound of a structural failure. I looked at Maria. Her face was grim, but she nodded. Once. I picked the phone up. I did not need to yell. The breaker was flipped. The power was flowing. My table is open. Dad, I said, my voice quiet again. It is always open. It's strong enough to hold everyone. I paused, and then added the new rule. But the people who sit at it, they have to learn how to listen. I pressed the red end call icon. The screen went dark. The connection was severed. I set the phone down on the sassafras table, placing it gently, as if it were a white-hot welding torch I was returning to its holder. I did not want to burn my house down. I just wanted the truth to hold its shape. Maria and I sat there for a long time, drinking our coffee. The only sound was the ocean, far below, breaking on the rocks, steady, relentless. The phone call with my grandmother had been a structural failure, a clean break. The silence that followed was the dust settling. I spent the rest of Christmas Day in my workshop, not working, but cleaning. I organized my tool chests. I swept the metal shavings from the floor. I wiped the lenses on my welding hoods. It was a way of resetting my world to a baseline of order. The next day, December 26th, my phone buzzed on the workbench. It was not a call. It was a text from a number I did not recognize. There was no greeting, just 3 images, sent in quick succession. They were blurry, clearly taken in haste. Photographs of a handwritten ledger book, the kind you buy at an office supply store. I zoomed in. The paper was pale green, ruled with red and blue lines. The columns were written in Lydia's precise, looping cursive. One column was titled In. The entries were all the same. H, Hale, Supple, Care, my grandmother's funds. The other column was titled Out, Holiday. The entries were varied. Table linens, 45. Floral, 200. Catering deposit, E, Raventon Club, 5,000. E, Hale, gift, jewelry, 3,000. Elise's engagement. My grandmother's care fund had paid for it. A new text came through from the same number. Rowan, this is Jonas Richter. I was your father's accountant for 12 years. I resigned last month. I've kept my mouth shut. But after what I heard from my cousin, who knows, Mrs. Albright, about your dinner? I can't. Your grandmother knows. She's been asking me questions. What Lydia did. It's not just the care fund. It's worse. I have the real books. Meet me, please. This was not a crack. This was a sinkhole. I looked at the text. This was no longer a family dispute. This was not about feelings or seating charts. This was wire fraud. This was theft. I replied, where and when? He named a coffee shop down at the commercial fishing docks. The Anchor, 10 a.m., tomorrow. My next text was to Sarah Jenkins, the community lawyer. Sarah, the situation I mentioned has escalated. I am meeting a whistleblower. I need you present. Your clock is running as of now. Her reply was instant. See you at 10. The anchor was not a cafe. It was a room that smelled of diesel fuel, stale coffee, and fried fish. It was full of men in rubber boots and heavy sweatshirts, reading the paper and ignoring us. It was my world. Sarah was already there, sitting in a back booth, a slim briefcase on the table. She looked as out of place, and as perfectly comfortable, as a stainless steel bolt in a pile of rusted iron. Jonas Richter slid into the booth opposite us. He was a small, nervous man, his hands shaking, clutching a worn leather satchel. Miss Hale, Rowan, Mrs. Jenkins, thank you for coming. I just want to make this right. Just show us the documents. Mr. Richter, Sarah said, her voice calm and devoid of emotion. He opened his satchel and slid a thick accordion file across the table. It was not a photocopy. It was the original set of books. Sarah and I spent the next 20 minutes in silence, broken only by the sound of her turning the pages. It was exactly as Jonas had said, and infinitely worse. The theft from my grandmother's care fund was meticulous, spanning years. Lydia had been using it as her personal holiday and gift slush fund. But that was not the worst of it. Sarah found the other ledger, the one for the Stormbreak Fishermen's Helpline. My blood went cold. The helpline was a local benevolent fund, started decades ago, to support the families of fishermen who were lost or injured at sea. It was the fund that Anya Petrova should have had access to. It was the fund Kenji Tanaka's SAR team sometimes coordinated with. It was the heart of the community I had just fed. And Lydia Hale, through some long-forgotten town appointment, was the treasurer. Look at this, Sarah said, her finger tapping a withdrawal slip. $10,000, withdrawn 4 years ago, the week of your sister's engagement. She flipped a page. And this, a wire transfer, to Raventon Club, catering. And this, a check, to DeLuca Jewelers. She didn't just use my grandmother's money, I whispered, the words feeling like ash in my mouth. She stole from widows. She stole from the families of the men who work on that water. She used the helpline fund to throw Elise that party, Sarah said, stating the fact. Then she used your grandmother's money to pay for the gifts and make the initial deposit to cover her tracks from the other direction. Jonas just nodded, his face pale. When the stock market dipped last quarter, the helpline's principal went down. The other board members, old fishermen mostly, they started asking for a full audit. Lydia kept stalling. And then, your grandmother, Helen, she called after she saw that video from your dinner. She called me, asking why her care fund statements looked so strange. Lydia panicked. She knew it was all about to come apart. He pushed one last document across the table, a letter from a bank. It was a formal notice of delinquency. The house, I said. The beige house in Raventon. They're 92 days past due on the mortgage, Jonas said. Graham's consulting business dried up. Lydia was covering the payments with money from other places. Now there are no other places. The bank is filing the notice of default. They're going to lose the house. Elise knew none of this, I was certain. She was a prop in her mother's play, wearing a ring paid for by the families of dead fishermen. I looked at Sarah. She was looking at me. Rowan, this is a criminal matter. We can take this to the district attorney right now. I shook my head. No, not yet. The D.A. will move slowly. The helpline needs its money now, and a public trial. That's not the goal. I reached into my bag and pulled out my portable document scanner, the wand I used for blueprints on site. I laid the first page of the ledger on the table, clicked the button, and slid the scanner down. The green light flashing, I scanned every single page. The ledgers, the bank statements, the invoices from the jeweler, the mortgage delinquency notice. I saved the encrypted file to my phone. Miss Richter, I said. You are a brave man. Thank you. Sarah will help you with formal whistleblower protection. You did the right thing. He looked relieved, as if a 30-year weight had been lifted. That afternoon, Sarah and I did not go to the police. We went to the town ethics committee. It was not a press conference. It was a quiet, formal submission. We filed an official request for a full, immediate audit of the Stormbreak Fishermen's Helpline, based on the whistleblower evidence. We submitted the scanned file. We received a case number. I saved the email chain. The machine was now in motion, quiet and official. Then I went back to my office at Hearthline House, alone. I made a phone call, not to a lawyer, to a private wealth manager I had worked with on a few complex commercial real estate deals. "David," I said, "I have an acquisition target. It's not a property, it's a note, a non-performing residential mortgage. I want you to set up a new LLC, effective immediately, something anonymous. Anchor Ridge Capital. I want Anchor Ridge to approach the bank holding the note for 1224 Sycamore Drive. Raventon. I want you to buy that debt, pay a premium. I want to own it by the end of the week." He was quiet for a moment. "That's an aggressive move. Rowan." "It's a structural repair. David, just get it done." I hung up. I did not want their house. I had my own, a better one, built of steel and truth. Taking their house would be demolition. It would make me Lydia. I am a welder. I do not demolish. I join. I reinforce. And sometimes, I use heat and pressure to bend a weakened structure back into alignment. By owning their debt, I was not becoming their landlord. I was becoming their inspector. The plan was forming. This was the ethical patch. I would not send them to jail. That was the committee's job to decide. I would not make them homeless. I would, however, set the conditions for their continued existence. They would make a full, public repayment to the helpline. They would make a full, public apology to the community they had stolen from. And then, as the new owners of their moral and financial debt, I would require them to accept one last, final truth. I had the police report, I had the financial crimes, and now I had the note. All the bolts were in place. All that was left was the final torque. It was December 30th, 4 days after the whistleblower, Jonas Richter, had handed me the ledgers, 3 days after Anchor Ridge Capital had officially and quietly become the sole lien holder on 1224 Sycamore Drive. I drove back to Raventon. It was late afternoon. The sky was the color of dirty steel. I did not park down the street this time. I parked my F-250 flatbed, the one with the Forge and Tide logo emblazoned on the door, directly in their driveway, blocking Lydia's sedan in the garage. I was not dressed for a family visit. I was dressed for an inspection. I wore my heavy canvas work coat, my steel-toed boots, and I carried a solid aluminum clipboard. Tucked into the clip were the papers from Anchor Ridge, the ethics committee filing, and a copy of the delinquency notice. I walked up the perfect, sterile sidewalk and rang the doorbell. The house was dark inside, except for one light, the Christmas tree lights. It was still standing in the living room, 5 days after Christmas, a decomposing witness. It was shedding needles, the branches drooping, the tinsel looking tired. The air smelled of stale pine and something else, something sour. Fear. The door opened. It was not Lydia. It was Elise. Her face was pale, blotchy, her eyes red and swollen. She was wearing an old gray sweatshirt, not her usual cashmere. The 2-carat diamond ring was gone from her hand. She saw me, standing there like a foreman, and she flinched. She looked not at my face, but at the clipboard. She knew. She told me, Elise whispered, her voice rough. She told me about the money, the helpline, the ring. I didn't know. Rowan, I swear to God, I didn't know. She was not an accomplice. She was just another prop. "I'm not here for you, Elise," I said, my voice flat, professional. I stepped past her, into the foyer. My boots made a heavy sound on the polished hardwood. Lydia and Graham were in the living room. They were sitting on their beige sofa, staring at the dead tree. They looked like they had not slept in days. When they saw me, Graham jumped to his feet. Lydia just stayed seated, her hands clenched in her lap, her face a mask of stone-cold hatred. You have no right to be here, Graham stammered, trying to find his authority. This is trespassing. I have every right, I said. I stepped into the center of the room. I unclipped the top paper from my clipboard and held it out. This is a plan, a blueprint for your next steps. You can call it a repayment schedule. I laid it out, my voice clear, as if I were giving a crew its morning briefing. You will sign a full, notarized transfer of financial oversight for the Stormbreak Fishermen's Helpline to an independent third-party auditor, to be appointed by the Town Ethics Committee. That happens tomorrow. 2. You will liquidate the necessary assets to make a full and immediate repayment of the $112,000 you, Lydia, misappropriated from the fund. That includes the $10,000 for this party, and the $3,000 for the ring Elise is no longer wearing. 3. You will both co-sign a public letter of apology, to be read aloud at the New Year's Eve Town Council meeting and published in the local paper. The letter will be addressed to the families of the helpline. I have already drafted it for you. Graham was staring at me, his mouth open. Lydia let out a low, guttural laugh. It was a sound like grinding metal. You? She sneered, her voice dripping venom. You come in here, into my house, after humiliating us, after turning our family against us, after everything. You think you can teach me? You think you can stand there in your filthy coat and give me orders? Who in the hell do you think you are? I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. I reached for the second set of papers on my clipboard. I slid them out from under the clip and placed them, very gently, on the coffee table in front of her. I am the person who owns the note on this house. I tapped the logo at the top of the page. Anchor Ridge Capital is a holding company. My holding company, as of yesterday. I am your creditor. You are 97 days past due. I am the one who decides if the bank forecloses, or if you get the chance to make this right. Graham made a choking sound and sank back onto the sofa. His hands, I noted, were shaking violently. He looked at the papers, then at me, then at the papers. The math was finally adding up in his head. Elise, who had been standing frozen in the hallway, let out a small, broken sound, like a stepped-on bird. She stumbled forward and collapsed onto the armchair, her face in her hands. She was finally, truly, understanding what her mother had done, what her perfect life was built on, a foundation of theft and lies. Lydia was motionless. Her eyes were fixed on the foreclosure notice. I could see the muscles in her jaw working, the fury building, the pressure rising. She was looking for a weapon, a way to regain control. Her eyes darted around the room, frantic. They landed on the Christmas tree. It was pure, conditioned instinct, a reflex. Her right hand twitched, her body tensed, her weight shifting as if to stand up and move toward it. She was going for a branch. I did not move toward her. I took one deliberate, measured step back. I reached into the deep inner pocket of my coat. I pulled out a folded sheaf of papers. Ah, I said, my voice still calm. I wouldn't do that if I were you. Lydia. I let the paper unfold. It was a pre-filed application for an emergency temporary restraining order. Sarah Jenkins had drafted it. All it needed was a judge's signature. This document, I said, is contingent. It cites the assault from 4 years ago, case number 74-9928. It states you have a history of physical violence toward me. Lydia froze, her hand hovering in the air. And also, I said, tapping the small, square device clipped to the center of my coat. My body camera is on. It has been recording audio and video since I left my truck. Every word you are saying, every threat you are implying, it is all being saved to a secure server, just like the last time. The fight drained out of her. It was not a surrender. It was a tactical retreat. Her body deflated, the rage turning to a cold, simmering ash. Elise, her head still in her hands, had been watching through her fingers. She suddenly stood up. She did not move toward her mother. She moved, for the first time in her entire life, to stand between us. She was not protecting me. She was protecting the last, shattered remnants of her own life. "Mom," she said, her voice a raw plea. "Stop. Just stop. It's over. He's right. She's right." She turned to me, her eyes desperate. "Rowan, please. We'll do it. The letter, the money. We'll do it. Just, please, don't take the house. It's all we have." I looked at her, the cheer captain, the golden child. She was, in this moment, just a girl who had found out her entire world was a stage, and the stage was collapsing. "I told you," I said. "I am not Lydia. I do not want your house. I do not want your money. I do not want a single cent for myself." I looked past Elise, past the dead tree, and locked eyes with my father. "I want two things. One, you will make the public apology and you will pay back every dollar you stole from the helpline. You will do that for them, for Anya, for the families of the men who drowned." I let the silence hang. Graham was looking at me, his gaze pleading. He was waiting for the other condition. He was waiting for a number. "And two," I said, my voice softening just a fraction. "I want one admission, not for the police, not for the committee, for me, right now, in this room." Lydia started to speak. "An admission of, Not from you," I cut her off. I did not take my eyes off Graham. "From him, I want the truth about the branch." Elise looked confused. "The branch? What branch?" Graham's face crumpled. The years of denial, of evasion, of carefully constructed silence, all came apart at once. He was not a businessman. He was not a father. He was just a coward, cornered by a truth he could no longer outrun. He nodded, a tiny spastic movement. He looked at the floor, at the space between his feet. He whispered. I just stood there." "Louder," I said. It was not a request. It was an order. He looked up, his eyes swimming, and for the first time, he looked at me. "That night," he choked out, the words tearing from his throat, raw and rusted. "She hit you. I saw it. I just stood there. I watched, and I said nothing." The confession hung in the air, heavy and absolute. It was not a satisfying sound. It was the sound of a nail, long bent, finally being pulled free from rotten wood. It was the sound of the end. It was the 31st of December, New Year's Eve. The long sassafras table at Hearthline House was set again, the deck lit by the same warm, steady glow of the Edison bulbs. But tonight, the guest list was different. Mike Finnegan's truck was there, but the air held a different kind of tension. It was not a celebration, it was a hearing. Anya Petrova was there, standing with two other women I did not know, their faces hard and lined with the same worry. They were all widows of fishermen, all beneficiaries of the helpline. Kenji Tanaka was there, not in dive gear, but in a simple dark sweater, his arms crossed, a silent observer. Mr. Eames was present, and Mrs. Albright, and the town councilwoman who headed the ethics committee. They were the witnesses, the community. My crew from Forge and Tide was there, standing by the steel fireplace, a quiet wall of support. And at the far, far end of the long table, I had placed 3 more seats, 3 simple, wooden chairs, identical to all the others. They were not at the head. There was no head. They were just at the end. At 6 p.m., a car I did not recognize pulled into my drive. A rental, Graham, Lydia, and Elise got out. They were dressed not for a party, but for a sentencing. They walked up the path, past the sign that read, "Who speaks is heard," and onto the deck. No one greeted them. No one offered them a drink. I had a laptop set up on a small, steel workbench. It was connected to a high-speed link, streaming to a private, unlisted video feed. The link had been sent to the full board of the helpline and my grandmother Helen's nursing home. "It is 6:05 p.m., I said, my voice carrying in the cold, still air. "The hearing will begin." I pressed the record button. The small red light came on. Comments on the stream are disabled. A full, unedited copy will be saved. I looked at my father. Graham, you first. He walked to the laptop, his hands shaking so badly he had to grip the sides of the workbench. He looked at the small, green camera light as if it were a loaded gun. My name is Graham Hale, he began, his voice a dry rasp. I am here tonight to apologize, not just for my wife's actions, but for my own, for my silence. He looked up, his gaze finding me, then moving quickly to the faces of the widows. A leader, a father, his job is to protect, to see the truth, and to speak it. 4 years ago, I failed to do that. I witnessed an act of violence, and I chose silence because it was easier, because it preserved a comfortable lie. That silence, he choked, was an action. It was complicity. It was a choice, and it was wrong. My silence permitted harm. Tonight, I am ending it. I am sorry for what I allowed to happen, and I am sorry I waited until I was forced. He stepped back, his face gray. I nodded. Once. Lydia. She moved to the laptop. She was not crying. Her face was a mask of rigid, cold compliance. She held a single, typed sheet of paper, the one Sarah Jenkins and the committee had approved. She read from it, her voice a monotone, devoid of all emotion. I, Lydia Hale, in my capacity as treasurer of the Stormbreak Fishermen's Helpline, do hereby admit to the misappropriation of $112,000 in fund assets, withdrawn between August 4 years ago and November of this year, for personal use. She looked up, her eyes black with a hatred so pure it was almost beautiful. I am sorry for the distress. This has caused the community. Read the next line, Lydia, I said, my voice quiet. Her jaw clenched. She looked back at the paper. I commit, she read, to a full, binding, and immediate plan of restitution. The full amount will be repaid to the fund, with interest, according to a schedule overseen by the Ethics Committee. The councilwoman stepped forward. The committee has received and approved the binding plan. The first wire transfer, liquidating their joint brokerage account, has been confirmed. The process of restitution has begun. Lydia finished. She crumpled the paper in her fist as she stepped away. I looked at the camera. This concludes the public statement. I stopped the recording. I saved the file. Then, I turned to Graham. I slid a new set of papers across the sassafras table. This is from Anchor Ridge Capital, I said. It's not a foreclosure notice. It's a new mortgage agreement. Now that you have an approved repayment plan for the helpline, my company is willing to restructure your private debt. The interest rate is 2%, fixed. The payments are sustainable. The schedule is for 30 years. Graham stared at it. You're not... I told you I don't want your house, I said. I wanted your compliance. I wanted the truth. The helpline gets paid first, always. You get a roof over your head, and you get a single, monthly reminder for the next 360 months of exactly what accountability feels like. Elise, who had been silent, pulled out her phone. She was looking at the video Mrs. Albright had posted, the one of my dinner. She typed something. She showed the screen to me. She had posted a public comment. A night where everyone has a seat, it read. I am so grateful for my sister, who is teaching me what that really means, even for those of us who sat on the wrong side for way too long. It was a small, polished, social media-friendly step, but it was a step. Good, I said, nodding to her. That's a start. I turned back to the table, to the community. Anya and the other widows were talking quietly with the councilwoman, looking at a copy of the repayment plan. There was no joy, just a grim, exhausted relief. I walked to the fireplace. From the wood box, I pulled a single, dry branch. It was the one I had saved from the Raventon police station 4 years ago, the one they had bagged as evidence and returned to me. It was gray, brittle, the needles long since fallen. I walked back to the center of the table and placed it in the middle, on the wood. Under the warm lights, it lay there, a dead thing, a relic, the weapon that had started it all. Lydia saw it. Her breath hitched. Graham closed his eyes. "This," I said to the table, "is what started it. This is the branch." I looked at it. It was just a piece of wood. It had no power. It was not a sword. It was just a broken piece of a dead tree. I picked it up. I put one hand on either side of it, and with a single, sharp, satisfying crack, I snapped it over my knee. I snapped the pieces again and again, until they were nothing but a handful of kindling. I walked to the steel fireplace, where the real fire, the warm one, was burning. I tossed the pieces in. They caught instantly, hissing, and then blazed up in a bright orange flare. The last shadow of that night was gone. Turned to heat, turned to light. Anya Petrova saw it, and she began, slowly, to clap. Then Mr. Eames joined her, then Kenji, then the entire deck, my crew, Mrs. Albright, the councilwoman, even Elise. They were clapping, not for me. They were clapping because something that was broken was finally, properly, finished. Then, as one, the clapping stopped. The silence that fell was not the silence of fear. It was the silence of completion. It was the sound of the world breathing, the sound of the waves on the rocks below, the sound of the steel frame of my house settling, warm and strong, the sound of truth. Graham, his face etched with a new, profound exhaustion, looked at me. He looked at the 3 empty chairs at the end of the table. I never understood," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I thought a table was for showing off, for the center. I'll learn. I'll learn to sit down before I speak." I looked at him, the man who had been my father. He was just a man, a tired, broken, ashamed man. I nodded toward the empty chair. "Sit down," I said. "There is no fairy tale ending. There is no magic. There is no grand reunion. There is just this: a payment schedule stuck to a refrigerator in Raventon. There is a public apology filed in the town records, and there is a long, strong table on a cliff, overlooking the sea, and it is, and always will be, open. If your work, your hands, your fire, has ever been dismissed, tell me where you are. Tell me what city you are in. Here, in this house, the light does not ask what color your collar is. It only asks what fire you bring to the table. The camera pans, slow and steady, along the length of the table. It passes every face, every chair, shoulder to shoulder. It moves out, over the railing, to show Hearthline House, lit from within, its steel frame glowing, a beacon of earned light against the dark. Endless ocean. That Christmas Eve, my father watched me get hit. Tonight, the whole town watched us make it right. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where in the world you are listening from. So please drop a comment below, connect with each other, and share your own thoughts. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and give us your support by hitting that hype button. It really helps get these stories out to more people who need to hear them.